I'm so sick and tired of the American media talking about pro-Palestinian. You know, during the Third Reich, were they saying pro-Germany? No, they're pro-Nazis. I think Americans are getting very pissed off at these Hamas terrorist supporters, these Jew haters, these organized efforts by Islamist organizations funneling their money through groups like CARE and the Hamas funding network. And not just them, George Soros and the usual malcontents and reprobates, Marxists and Islamists, and in some cases just ignorant, punkish type college and graduate students. It strikes me as the same groups that were involved in the 2020 riots, which Joe Biden said the other day was really a spectacular civil rights movement. And there'll be more on him in the days and months ahead because he's not going to get away with, as far as I'm concerned, claiming that he's Mr. Democracy and everybody else is of the black boots and brown shirts of the Third Reich. So we're going to deal with that and constantly. All that said, there are individual acts of bravery and common sense by American citizens pushing back against this, minding their own business in their car with a little kid in their car, driving to work, driving to a relative's, doing whatever people do, and then they get caught up with these people blocking tunnels, blocking bridges, blocking highways to make life as inconvenient as possible. And they think they're going to win people over. These are really the frontline troops for the Marxists and Islamists who behind the scenes are pulling the strings and funding all this. And as I explained on my Fox show on this week, and I believe it was the Saturday show, there's an enormous amount of money pouring into colleges and universities, $40 billion since 1990. That's what we know of. From Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Russia, and Communist China, among others. And they're buying these operations like journalism schools and political and government departments, and they're funding faculty chairs. It just goes on and on and on, and how they have basically bought and paid for higher education. And they've bought and paid for a lot of people who comment on TV about events. And by the way, some of them are Republicans. And so the average American loves this country. They're red-blooded. They have a place to go from point A to point B. They don't want to be bothered with all these creeps. And so one of these instances played out in New York. It was nonviolent, but the father had had enough. Go.
Headlines we're following today: city bridges and tunnels are flowing again. This after pro-Palestinian protesters blocked some of them.
They're not pro-Palestinian. They're pro-Hamas Nazis. That's what they're pro. Let's get this straight. I'm so sick and tired of the American media talking about pro-Palestinian. You know, during the Third Reich, were they saying pro-Germany? No, they're pro-Nazis. The Palestinians, pro-Palestinian, even the so-called phony moderates, the peaceful Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, aka the West Bank, they're terrorizing the indigenous peoples there, the Jews, and the PLO, that is the Palestinian Authority, they call themselves now, Arafat's group, that group is now building tunnels and doing all the rest of it. So Abbas, the head of the PLO, he had one election and he's never stepped down, and they've never had another election. He's placed family members in important positions. These people are becoming billionaires, multimillionaires, taking all the money that you and me, the taxpayers, send to them. That money is sent to them by the UN and Europe and all the rest. These guys are pocketing this money. And then I hear today that Blinken says, well, we're pressuring Israel to make sure that, number one, this comes to an end. Number two, that we have a diplomatic solution to terrorism. Just look at the imbecile that is our secretary, a diplomatic solution to terrorism? And furthermore, he says he wants the Gazans to return to their homes when it's all said and done. Isn't it amazing? For the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, their presence there started in 2005. But we want to make sure they can go back to their homes. They never populated the Gaza Strip. it was Egyptian, and even before that, Jewish tribes had settled there. But there were never Palestinians, quote unquote. So we're going to make sure that the Palestinians who were given this land by the Jews in 2005 can return after all this. But when it comes to the Jews in Judea and Samaria, which they've populated for 4,000 years, they need to surrender that to the Palestinians. Does this make sense to anybody? If the Israelis, either their government or their people, follow what Biden and Blinken are saying, they will destroy themselves. They will commit suicide, just as we are committing suicide in our own country with fools like this. Take a look. Go.
During the morning rush, it happened at Brooklyn, Williamsburg, and Manhattan bridges, as well as the Holland Tunnel. And we learned police arrested.
So strategically, the Marxists and the Islamists are blocking off 4 major causeways, entries, egresses, in and out of parts of New York City. All intentional. Go ahead.
334 people today. News 4's Erica Byfield has more details.
The police made arrests at all 4 crossings today. Afterwards, the mayor made it clear that protesting in the city is okay, but disrupting traffic is not. Around 10 a.m., traffic in lower Manhattan stalled as pro-Palestinian protesters waited.
They're not pro-Palestinian. They're pro-terrorists. And these so-called protesters here are the same people from 2020 for the most part. And let me tell you a little secret. They all are Democrats or worse. And none of them are Republicans. None of them are voting for Trump or DeSantis or anybody else. Go ahead.
Some of the busiest crossings in the city and stood shoulder to shoulder or sat down. In a coordinated effort, hundreds of people with huge banners that read, "Lift the siege on Gaza, ceasefire now," blocked access to the Holland Tunnel, Manhattan Bridge, Brooklyn Bridge, and the Williamsburg Bridge.
Get out of the way!
Frustrating police and angering drivers.
Go fight this on the sidewalk somewhere, because the same amount of people are going to pay attention. Trust me.
We saw a few pro-Israel supporters in the mix. They say they saw the demonstrations from their windows and rushed outside.
I think that Lomi, she's my friend. She's a prisoner in Gaza, and I want her to be released. This is my thoughts.
Citizen video shows what it looked like from above. Dozens of people, some in construction-style bright vests, refused to move. The NYPD then deployed resources on the ground and in the air.
From my observations, we had our drones up, and it gave me a real bird's-eye view of what was taking place.
At a midday briefing, Mayor Eric Adams said that he understands the seriousness of this conflict between Israel and Hamas, but he says blocking traffic is uncalled for.
The goal is to peacefully protest without doing major disruption to the city. Some people are not just driving to and from crossing our bridges to go to their place of employment. Some of them are dealing with some real emergency type issues.
Yeah, let's stop a minute. What about that? What about ambulances? What about fire trucks? What about people who are in distress? They can't get to where they need to be. What about all? They could care less. They could care less. Go ahead.
Eventually, officers in all 4 locations moved in, cuffing and removing those in the way. At the Holland Tunnel alone, Port Authority police arrested 120 people, while the NYPD says it removed dozens of protesters.
Now, of course, if this were Gaza, and if this were the festival that so many young people were attending, what would be happening now is terrorists would be coming across the border, murdering, raping, torturing these young people by the hundreds within an hour and a half. They'd be driving them off somewhere, holding them as hostages. I just posted some information about how all these female hostages are being abused and raped and beaten and tortured. Think about that. And our government's policy is to put pressure on Israel. Our government's policy is that Israel should stop. Our government's policy is that all the Palestinians should be able to return to their homes. And tell me, how is Israel going to distinguish between terrorist and a peaceful, innocent Palestinian citizen? How are they going to do that? It's impossible, particularly coming from an administration that doesn't vet people coming across our own border. This whole thing is insane. Insane. Go ahead.
The officers even forced to use a saw to break through cement to make some of those arrests.
You're fighting this in the streets of New York. Nobody cares of nothing. Nobody cares about your feelings in New York.
A representative with the NYPD tells us that some of those protesters got desk appearance tickets. They also said that some other protesters face more serious charges.
You're disrupting traffic, idiots. You can't do that. That's against the law.
Now stop a minute. Notice he has a little American flag there? Good man. Go ahead.
I'm not just going to throw a fist at y'all, bro. I'm not going to run y'all over. Get away from my car, bro. Okay, Get away from my car! Bro, get away from my car. I have a daughter in Brooklyn! Don't touch him! Get out of the way! Run him over! Don't touch him! Get out of the way! I have to get home!
So this is going on all over the place. You just happen to see this one instance taking place. It's all organized. It's all well-funded. It's all intended to create havoc and to try and pressure the radical left and try and create the impression that these people are in the majority. They're not in the majority. The truth is, if we had to rely on these Democrat Party militia, these Democrat Party thugs for food, water, or sustenance, we'd all starve to death. We'd all starve to death. Because this is all these people do, day in and day out. And I guarantee you, we're subsidizing most of them with student loans, with health care, with some kind of welfare. We're subsidizing all of them.
For all this and much more, sign up for Levin TV.